Hello, it's Tyrone Keys again, and I'm here with another great interview. We've got two of the most dynamic real estate, commercial real estate. We're going to talk commercial real estate today. We chat about residential from time to time, but commercial's really in a very interesting place in the nation right now. So, in a moment, I'm going to introduce these two guys who are going to walk us through some of the permutations and some of what's going on and how that will look maybe a year from now, 2 years from now, what opportunities might be out there. But for now, let me just mention one of our partners, Assurance Title. I want to bring everybody's attention to Assurance because that is a company that we work with regularly. They've been kind enough to come out and partner with us on these videos. So the link is here or maybe here. In any event, check them out if you're prosecuting any type of real estate transaction, because title work is essential. You've got to get it done. And these are professionals that can walk you through what needs to be done and give you real peace of mind in that transaction, whether it be investment, real estate, whether you are, or whether you're purchasing a home for you and your family to live. So Assurance Title, check them out. Now, without further ado, we have Evan Langert. Say hello, Evan.
Hey, everybody. How are you?
Evan is joining us from an abandoned Nike missile silo somewhere in Colorado. He's made it his lair where he operates out of. We'll get Evan to talk about his credentials in a moment. And we have Scott Smith.
Hey, how are you?
And as you can see, Scott is on the run from a military junta somewhere in the Middle East. They have been kind enough to give him a reprieve so he can do this. So you can do this. So
this is my proof of life. This is my proof of life.
So, Evan, let's start with you. Give us some background.
Sure. So I am a 35-year veteran of commercial real estate. Started out back in the 80s after I got out of law school, took the bar, passed it, but elected to go into commercial real estate lending with Maryland National, which was one of the 25 largest banks in the country. So I did 5 years of that. Then I went into law, worked for a small company that was owned by the founder of the Federal Realty Investment Trust. I won't go through my whole, machinations, but spent a lot of years in law, was the head transactional attorney for the eastern half of the U.S. for a publicly traded REIT for almost a decade. Got tired of sitting in my offices negotiating papers, had stacks of papers and a telephone, and but like brokerage and had been exposed to it. So I went out into brokerage. I've been doing brokerage for about 12 years now or so. And little sprinklings of law, negotiating leases and purchase and sale agreements, but I try to minimize that. I've been around a long time, 40 plus years of my life in Maryland, DC area native. So that's me.
Now, we're going to talk a little bit about some of the other opportunities that exist within commercial like REITs. Now, you had some experience with that as well, right?
I did. I was on the transactional side. I know a lot of times people hear a REIT and they start asking me about, the mechanics of REITs and formation and things along that line. I was really just a transactional person.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Evan.
Mm-hmm.
Scott.
Hey.
What's up? What are, tell the people about your credentials, why you're here and that sort of thing.
Okay. So I started my first company right out of high school in 1996. It was a real estate service related company. Through that, I got my real estate license. I'm not sure. I think that was 2002. I think I got my real estate license in 2002 as an investor. So I was buying properties on my own, fixing them up, selling them, that kind of stuff. Realized real quickly I didn't really like residential real estate from a service perspective. So numbers have always been my thing. So I started looking into commercial real estate. And so I put myself through the CCIM curriculum as an investor, not as the broker, but as an investor. And so I finished my CCIM in 2007, I think is when I got penned. So that's like getting your PhD, I guess, in commercial real estate. And then I went the way of education. So I pride myself in being a commercial real estate professor and curriculum and content contributor. And I teach people how to do commercial real estate as well as assist agents in their transactions and corporate leasing. So, yeah.
Gotcha. Okay, so we've got a breadth of knowledge and experience here. So let's jump right into it. Now, the elephant in the room is, a certain virus that shares a name in common with a great beer. We all know what we're talking about, and it has really affected the commercial real estate market. I read in the Wall Street Journal this morning that quite a few, I think 100,000, if I recall correctly, of the people who received the PPP loans are going out of business,
Yeah.
or filing bankruptcy. So one complaint of an individual in that article was that it just wasn't enough. You shut us down. Then you came back and demanded we operate at a business at 50%. And people are now surprised. Policymakers are actually surprised that businesses have gone defunct. So, of course, these businesses, a lot of which are restaurants. I've had 3 of my favorite restaurants closed down for good, gone. Okay, places that have been here for almost 50 years, gone. So when we start to look at that from the standpoint of commercial on that small retail side, but then we've even got Verizon, Raytheon coming out and saying they're slashing, they're going to leverage technology and they're not going to need the amount of space they had. Raytheon said they're going to cut by 25%. So I want you guys to weigh in. I'm not one that, I don't get into the panic thing. Things shake out one way or the other. Opportunity developing broadly.
Yeah. So I think that from what I've seen, technology has really kind of made business owners look at how much space they have and how much space do they actually need, and is there other cost saving measures in which they can change things and adapt to the, I hate to use the term new normal, but I mean, we've been going at it for a year now. So if you haven't figured out a game plan, you're probably not going to figure out a game plan. And so how does that look? Well, we did an analysis a couple weeks ago on 200 companies. If each company had 20 locations and each location was 10,000 square feet. So not a huge company, but sizable. And they just in 200 companies with that amount of locations and that amount of square feet, it would add like 500 million square feet back to the office market, right? Well, that's just 200 companies. You figure if 100,000 companies are going out of business, what does that do to the square footage in both retail and in office? So that's kind of what I'm seeing on the ground. Just looking at the numbers and doing the analysis, it's looking like Baltimore third quarter Baltimore retail has got a almost 300,000 square foot negative absorption rate. That's where we're at.
So now, Evan, I know that you handle some retail space out there. What are you seeing in terms of the attitudes? Are they able to even get the financing, or are banks and lenders, are they even feeling as though they're confident enough to extend financing for commercial space?
it's more and more difficult in the lending industry, and I don't mean any disparaging remarks to the lending industry, but they're not the quickest movers on the face of the earth. So, I mean, they're being slow to lend. Their parameters are getting tougher. I've been, I'm going to be 60 next month. I've been around for enough cycles to kind of see how things go. And they're typically pretty quick to tighten their parameters. And then once things start to open up again, they're a lot slower to open them up. So, I mean, I think people buying commercial real estate can look forward to probably putting more down, having overall much tighter parameters in place.
Okay, so more money down, and then they've got to deal with the uncertainties of shutdowns. I know that Evan, you and I were talking about businesses are starting to require sign-ins, and I actually, I had a similar incident. I broke my glasses, so I had to get new ones, and I went into a Vision Works, and the lady took my temperature. So you got more of that going on. And fellas, correct me if I'm mistaken on this, but I think that creates somewhat of a chilling effect and a reinforcement of the apprehension, and kind of gets in people's psyches and tells them, maybe you don't want to go to that restaurant, or maybe you want to, order something from Amazon as opposed to go out to your local store and get it. Thoughts?
If I'll jump in here. So I was at a Panera Bread this morning. I frequently am because business is all over the place, and they're a good place to grab coffee and not doing a pitch here, but and get Wi-Fi and things along that line. So
if Panera wants to sponsor us,
yeah, we're open. Yeah, we're indeed open to that.
Yeah.
So and then I'm going to also add, I went into an independent restaurant in Anne Arundel County yesterday for lunch, and I'll back up and start with that one. So I walked in with my mask on. I walked up to the desk to order. They took my temperature, which was normal for people of my planet anyway. So then I placed my order, and they said, "Do you want to eat here?" And I said, "Yes, I do. I'd prefer it." At which point they gave me a pad and a paper and said that I would have to write down my name and my telephone number if I was going to eat there. So, I mean, just one layer after another layer after another layer. And then this morning in Panera, I was there. Everything was fine. I guess the people who knew what was going on hadn't come in yet. And then I went to the counter a little bit later for something else. And he said, "Did you sign in yet?" And I said, "Sign." I didn't know what they were talking about for the most part. And anyway, it's now Prince George's County law that if you're going to eat in a restaurant, I guess you've got to sign your name and your telephone number. And I took a look around. Like I said, I'm in these places a lot. And I've been noticing over the past bunch of weeks, more traffic jams, more and more traffic, more and more crowds in restaurants and stores and things along that line. And I took a look around as I was leaving the Panera Bread this morning. It was empty. There were 4 people in there. So I think part of it is people are more afraid of the virus. And then the other thing is I think the pleasant experience that it might be to go into a restaurant for lunch or a coffee shop or something like that, it's taken away. I don't want to overstate it and say I felt like a prisoner. It wasn't that. I'm just searching for another comparison. But all of a sudden it's like, well, this step and now that step, and that sort of thing. And so I think it's definitely having a chilling effect on people. And the restaurant yesterday was right smack dab in the middle of lunchtime, and they were empty. So and I went out and sat and ate in my car, and there were a bunch of other people in their cars sitting around eating as well. So it's really different out there right now.
And if you're sitting and eating, if you're eating in your car, then that doesn't justify the amount of space that these establishments have, contracted for. You're doing carry out business,
right?
as a full-fledged restaurant. That's not a winning recipe.
Well,
Pardon the
not at
pun.
all. Plus they have, I mean, you go on now, at least Prince George's County is, I think, well, I think it's the whole state, but it's at 25%, is it not, for restaurants? Um, so
Yeah.
you go into, I'll use the Panera Bread simply because I was there most recently, but 3/4 of the, because people don't, I see people all the time, this table is not available, plunk, they sit right down there every day, over and over and over again. So now they've got this little blue tape across 3/4 of their table. And, I mean, I guess on a subtle level, I mean, it just kind of, your experience gets taken away from. But yeah, these places are not utilizing space. Retail floor space, Scott will tell you, is as expensive as anything there is. And they're not able to make use of it. It's a devastating scenario.
So, Scott, let's start talking about the opportunity. Now, where is it? Because even when you look at residential real estate, you've got certain moratoriums out there on eviction. So look, let's just be real here. The United States government has said that, look, we don't want to be in the housing game, so we'll give incentives to folk who create housing. Okay. We don't want to be in the retail game, so we give all kinds of incentives to folks that do that. But you got to go out in most cases and secure financing in order to do that. So you start with a tenant, whether they be residential or a commercial tenant, retail tenant, who cannot pay their rent through no fault of their own. Okay. That kicks up to whoever owns that note. Now, if they've got financing on that note or a series of notes, it creates, of course, that domino effect as you go up. And we stop at the banks and their bottom line.
Yeah.
So I mean, where do you see this going if we can't break this cycle soon?
Yeah, sure. So there's multiple levels and layers to that answer. First is right now the government's propping up retail and businesses through things like the PPP and the EIDL and the small business grants and things like that. So as opposed to bailing out the bankers, which they had previously done, right now they're assisting the small businesses, which amen for them for doing that, or it would look a lot worse than it is now. But it's not working. And as long as they continue to have 25% maximum capacity, it's not going to work. Businesses can't operate on 25% capacity. It's just the numbers don't pan out however you cut it. So they're going to have to start doing what they did previously. And now, as those tenants are not able to pay and the landlords are not able to pay their mortgages because the tenants aren't paying their leases, the banks are going to be held with all of this debt, which means the government's going to have to come in and do the commercial mortgage-backed security and boister that up as the only stopgap for a complete financial catastrophe, worse than what we've probably seen since the Great Depression, right? So there's several things that they can do. How do I see that panning out? I mean, our society can't operate on insecurity. It just can't. Like you said, some of your favorite restaurants have recently went out of business. Well, if that restaurant, what happens to the suppliers that were supplying that restaurant? You know what I'm saying? All of a sudden, what do they do with their inventory? If no one else is buying that inventory that restaurant now closed up, what do they do with that? So it's not just that restaurant that's affected. It's that whole supply chain all the way down. And that's what a lot of people don't grasp.
It's that supply chain. It's also, if you've got 10 employees in there who were paying on a car note, buying clothing for the kids, going out to the movies twice a month, all of that has been interdicted now. So, Evan, with that situation, I mean, we've got, in my estimation, and maybe I'm just not being creative enough, but we've got either you open society back up and you know, go
Right.
from there, or you add national debt clock. I checked it yesterday. We're up around 28 trillion. And when people mention trillion and billion, people just glaze over because it's hard to conceptualize.
Yes,
Well,
sir.
they're more than we owe more dollars than there are literally stars in the Milky Way galaxy. So maybe that helps people conceptualize what's going on here. But either we pump more money into stimulus, because again, the state governments, in association with the federal government, they're making these decisions.
Yeah.
These aren't bad business decisions by business owners. These are government edicts. So where's the responsibility? So we either open society back up fully, or we head toward $40 trillion in debt. Is there another solution that I'm missing?
I mean, I'm trying to step lightly here so I don't get myself into trouble, but I'm not particularly good at that. So, yeah, I mean, this is devastating. I understand when this all started. Nobody had seen anything like this before, and nobody quite knew what to do with that sort of a thing. Now here we are, 7, 8 months into this. There's a lot of data. We have experience. We know the death rates, and we know the rates of infection and things along that line. And it isn't as bad. I'm just talking statistically. It isn't as bad as people feared that it would be. Now, I don't want to get into an argument with somebody about whether it's near the flu or or far away from it. But the statistics say that the death rates aren't that high, not much higher than the flu. Looks like we have 2 vaccines on the horizon here, and things along that line. So, when we had the H1N1 and when we've had the flu, which just killed tens of thousands of people in a bad year, we've never done anything like this.
Right.
You're expected to be wise and smart. It's always been grandparents, great grandparents, etc. If you're particularly vulnerable and it's a heavy flu season, you're careful. You don't go here, you don't go there, you watch yourself. Never before have I seen anything where it's just like nobody can go anywhere. Your business can't host more than 25% of people. You can't, in some states now, you can't have more than 10 for Thanksgiving, I understand.
Well, that's the recommendation, right?
Yeah, well, I think if I'm not mistaken, and I could be, but I think in California that's requirement. So I've never seen anything like this. To me, one statistic I caught on 2 months ago was the rates of suicides that were going up, the rates of drug addiction that were going up, of alcoholism. And I know of somebody that I know with one death in their family. But as people get pinned in and people don't have hope and things along that line, they turn to these things.
Yeah.
And the rate of increase in the suicides and in drug addiction and things along that line has been skyrocketing. So you're sitting there going, okay, we're saving lives from COVID, but at the same time, other people are losing everything they've got, losing their businesses that they put their lives into, losing hope, losing the ability to connect with friends, to go in school and all that sort of stuff. And I'm not sure that a great balance has been struck. I prefer that we handle it by letting people be intelligent and be thoughtful. And granted, not everybody is that. Do I go out? Do I take the risk? I mean, we've always been all about individual liberties here. So I make my decision. I have friends and I respect their decisions. They don't go anywhere.
Right.
They're scared of this, many for good reason. They've got pre-existing conditions and things along that line. And I respect their decision. That's right for you. But it's different to say, well, I'm not going to go out to a restaurant. I'm not going to go out to this. I'm not going to go out to that. than it is to say, well, nobody else can either, because not everybody agrees on this. People are willing to take risks that other people are not willing to take. And it doesn't look like this is, for the most part, and I'll probably get into trouble for this, it doesn't look like this is a life or death situation. I think the government usually mucks up things that it gets overly involved in, especially when it comes to business. And I think they're causing a whole lot of harm and a whole lot of hurt here, a whole lot of lost jobs, a whole lot of lost businesses and things along that line, more suicides, more drug addiction, alcohol addiction. I think it's a shame.
Yeah, Ty, let me jump in on that as well, because I believe the question.
Let me say this one thing, Scott. Let me say this one thing. Keep that thought real quick. The other thing that they're going to soon be missing out on, really they already started, is tax revenue.
Oh yeah.
The government doesn't have any money of its own.
No.
Okay, it gets it from taxes. If you got folk that are relinquishing their real estate, losing their jobs and their businesses, not shopping, all of those things are taxed.
Right.
So go ahead, Scott.
Great. One thing that we can do, I believe the question was, how does that play into where does it go from here? I think one thing, and this is just my personal belief, and it may be slightly controversial because not a lot of people do this, but one thing that we can do, and it sounds really good as a tagline, but few people actually put it into practice. Go local, right? And when I say that, I mean, yes, I care about the national economy, but you know what I care about more? My home and personal economy, right?
Sure.
And so if I can buy my meat at the local butcher, if I can get my coffee from a local coffee person that has their local company, and I can go direct to the supplier and go direct to the producer of goods and services, that is going to directly assist that small business owner.
Right.
And also be able to produce something that then other purchasers want to buy, and really support that small business backbone, not just with the taglines and not with the loan.
Right.
Go buy from your local butcher. You don't have to go to the supply chain. Yes, it's more expensive. Yes, it is probably, you may have a longer wait time. It's not an instantaneous society. But I think if more people did that in today's economy, it would be a direct support to the small businesses, because those small businesses aren't getting the funds from the government like the national chains are, right?
They're not. Right.
And so that's one thing I think we could do to support the commercial real estate economy, is go directly to the small business owners and support them directly.
That's an excellent point, because you oftentimes also get a higher level of quality, because these are people in your neighborhood. These are people who own businesses that really, word of mouth, their success hinges on that reputation. Unlike the Walmarts or the Wegmans of the world, where you're a very small minnow in an ocean in terms of your customer experience. So that's good advice. Now, we've talked about the challenges. Now, what I always like to do is I like to also look at a challenge and figure out how to prosper. So let's do a round robin before we wrap up here. I want to, and I'll start, but I want you guys, because you're there, you're in the thick of things in that commercial industry. Let's talk about where the opportunities are. Now, I'm going to come off with a commercial opportunity. It may be a little different because I see it from an investment standpoint primarily. I'm not on the ground like these two experts are. But in looking at two areas where commercial real estate space is essential, I've identified two groups of real estate investment trust REITs. One is the data center REIT, which houses all of the co-located equipment for the cloud. The cloud is really a brick and mortar structure out in the middle of Kansas somewhere, heavily
Right.
guarded,
Right.
climate control building. So I'm looking at the data center REIT sector. Um, Either way you go, you know, we've seen an uptick in Zoom traffic, all types of remote work applications that rely on that technology, the co-located data centers.
Mhm.
Netflix, whatever you do, your phone, it all ties back to that. And that traffic is growing. The other sector where I'm high on in terms of the real estate investment trust is the hospital groups of REITs. And not just because of the current situation with the virus, but because we have an aging population that is requiring more medical care. So that's a play on that piece of it, and looking at the real estate, the parts of the commercial real estate industry that are in high demand, and they're going to stay in high demand. So those are my picks in terms of looking at opportunity in this sector. Evan, what do you see? How can we get some value and opportunity out of these challenges?
Sure. So, again, I've been through a bunch of these cycles, and it's never, we talk about everything in general terms, like how's commercial real estate doing? And commercial real estate is made up of a bunch of little micro worlds. And even within the retail sector, I haven't heard the real recent statistics, but in the first month when COVID hit, strip centers, their collection rates were in between 60 and 65% of revenues. Malls were 20%. So you can't even just take retail real estate and say, this is what's happening out here. It's different by geography. It's different by type of center. It's different by use. People tend to go towards safety, and utility here. So the things that you don't need, you tend not to buy. And the things that are, in this case, we have things closed down. You've got sit down restaurants. I mean, I've got clients who own banquet halls. I've had people that I've worked with who service the food operations at stadiums and big open air arenas and things along that line. And people who are, serve food and beverage to restaurants and bars and things along that line. That's real tough. A lot of the sit down restaurants are tough. I have not seen any short lines at Chick-fil-A, or McDonald's or things along that line. I see a lot in the restaurant industry where people are focusing more on carry out, more drive through, less internal space. But a couple that I see, in the midst of this, grocery stores are doing quite well. Drugstores are doing quite well. Dollar General, last time I read, they're adding 50,000 employees and still adding 1,000 stores a year. So historically, when I've looked for investments with people, especially if they're long term, we look at, okay, the economy is really good right now. I mean, pathetically that it was when we were talking like this, but it isn't going to be that way forever. We're going to go through a down cycle. And so who tends to hang on? And so we looked at dollar stores. People have a fascination, ladies in particular in my own family, have a fascination with dollar stores. They do well in the good times. They do even better in the bad times. Grocery stores are doing quite well. Particularly in the bad times, the people don't buy new cars. They'll have their cars serviced. And now that there are more and more videos out there on YouTube, more people will fix their own cars. So auto parts stores and things along that line. So I would think people go more towards safety. Those investments are going to become more popular. Other things that I have going on, I mean, I've got an expanding urgent care client. That's a good business. I've got things that are just steady. I've got a national chain of upscale laundromats, to the extent that those two things can be used in the same sentence. People don't need dry cleaning if they're not going to go to the office.
Right.
But you need clean clothes, and you either have washer dryer in your home or you don't. and you can't sit there and go, you can sit there and say, well, I'm not going to put on my suit and tie and go into the office today. But you don't say, well, I think I'm just going to wear dirty clothes for the next 6 months. So those things, when this first started, I was very restaurant heavy. For 2 or 3 weeks, all I got was phone calls from people that I've been working with, not looking anymore, on hold, that sort of thing. And sitting there for 2, 3 weeks going, oh my. And then thank God, these other things came along, but it's been a shift. So I think you're looking at more industries that can be that are good in good times, most of which I mentioned. So I'll just leave it there. I don't want to take up all our time. I'll just leave it there with my observations on the retail landscape, and then I'll leave Scott to talk about some of the other aspects of this.
And
Sure.
Scott, I don't want to steal any thunder, and you can elaborate on these things, but I just want to, if that was your plan, I just wanted to add liquor stores and the aesthetics business. Okay, those are things that Amazon is not going to be doing your nails or hair for the ladies or anything like that. And they're certainly not going to be delivering alcohol to the tune that people consume it. So
I personally would not invest in any of those, just because I don't support that as a person. My personal investment strategy isn't that aspect. But I would say from a commercial real estate standpoint, distribution centers, warehouse, and REITs like Prologis. Now, I don't know what their stock is, but you can invest in industrial supply chain management. That kind of business aspect, I think, is going to just increase exponentially, just like we've seen the extraction from retail. I actually think, and then kind of like my second thought to that is, I actually think that office may be able to save retail, because where people don't want to go into an office building because there's 1,000 other people in that because of the germ phobia that's developing. I think having a smaller 5-10,000 square foot standalone on Main Street somewhere, that has more of appeal now than it probably ever has to tenants that can say, wait a second, if I can control my own space, not have to worry about somebody else's company and the liability that comes along with that. If I can just control my own space, not have any common areas, not have any other co-tenancy issues, then that's kind of what I want to do. So I can actually see office users leaving skyscrapers and going into the smaller standalone retail aspect of this because of a control factor. I think
now,
that's great rent growth potential versus an office building.
and office buildings, I want to kind of end with this because this is a fascinating kind of phenomenon or outcome that you talked about previously, Scott, and I think it's emblematic of the challenges that office space faces with the restrictions and everything. Talk to us about that study that showed that there will be a multi-hour commute, not from Baltimore to DC, but from the lobby of certain buildings to the top floors of that building, and why that was the case.
Yeah, so we studied several skyscraper buildings, 100-floor type operations, and we looked at the amount of employees that occupy those buildings. And if we were to go back to a full capacity with the requirement of maximum elevator usage in these COVID restrictions, I think it was like 4 people per elevator, right? It would take like an hour from the lobby to get to your office just because of the amount of people that are in those skyscraper buildings that it's just a math equation. And you look at it and you're like, well, if only so many people can go up per hour and there's this many people in the building, how long is it going to take me to get from my lobby to my place of business? And it was like completely unsustainable. I mean, it's just, and what would a delivery guy do? I mean, think of the FedEx guy who has to run up into an office building and he's got to take the elevator. You know what I'm saying? Like, I mean,
Right.
so it's unsustainable is probably the best word to subscribe 2020. What we're doing is unsustainable in all fronts.
Evan, any parting words?
No, but I mean, I think unsustainable is a great word. This can't keep going. I mean, the numbers of people that are going to get really, really badly hurt, and they don't have a bunch of other options is just mind-boggling. I was chuckling a little bit when Scott talked about the trip from the lobby up there. It's like, hate to spend that hour and get up to my office only to remember that I forgot my briefcase.
Right.
Yeah, but I mean, there are all sorts of permutations to this sort of a scenario, and that's a good wrap up word. Something's got to give here. But
All right.
I also do want to say, from an office standpoint, there's another factor that's that I think is going to hurt offices. There are a number of corporations. So one of my relatives works for a big Fortune 500 company. And I remember when I worked for the REIT, they didn't want you working at home. They figured bad things happen when you work at home. You slack off, even though you might be in a job where your production is pretty self-evident. And so now we've been in a situation where people are forced to work at home. So they didn't want to do that. And now people are working at home, and everything I've heard, it's worked out rather well. And so this particular person that I'm talking about, their company has gone from, we don't want anybody to working at home to we want everybody working at home as much as possible. So yeah, there's people are looking at the need for less office space, but also companies that thought the world was going to end if people worked at home and then their productivity was going to get cut in half have found out otherwise. And I think that's another factor that's going to play into lessening of a desire and a need for office space.
Yeah, agreed.
Well, gentlemen, we will do this again. I'm going to rely on your expertise in this sector and of the commercial real estate world. And there'll be a lot more to talk about as we move through the challenges that have been brought to us. But for now, ladies and gentlemen, you can't hear it, but the revolutionaries have breached the perimeter. Scott has to run to his next undisclosed location. And Evan and I have work to do. So yeah. Thanks, Evan. Thanks, Scott. We will do this again.
Yes, sir.
And I'll talk to you guys soon.
All right,
take care, gentlemen.